Research Centre with SFI, Science Foundation Ireland. I'm delighted to be here, so I hope I can give you a different perspective a bit today. So when I walked into the room this morning, I felt like I'd walked into the wrong location. I'm coming from a manufacturing background, obviously, but I think there's real synergies here and real opportunities for me to share what we've learned, I suppose, in the last 18 months of our existence, and maybe to coalesce some of that with a lot of what you're doing from a digital twin perspective. So I'm firstly going to talk a little bit about who we are, what we do, and how we do it. The why is very important as well. So why do we do it? Why do we look at digital twin as part of our research portfolio? Why is it important? And why are manufacturing companies looking at it? Then I'll talk briefly about standards a little bit, following on from a recent presentation I made at NSAI, the National Standards Authority of Ireland, where I look at why standards in this nascent area are very, very important and why companies are looking at it. And thirdly, then I'll go a little bit deeper into digital twin technology and where we're at in the manufacturing landscape. So who are we and what do we do? Well, fundamentally, our principal tenet is to, I suppose, transform the Irish manufacturing sector. And it's a very lofty ambition, okay? So we're there ultimately to improve the capability of Irish manufacturing and digitise industry, digitise manufacturing from cradle to grave. So everything from blockchain at the front end in terms of capturing information, decomplexing, securitising information, decomplexing your supply chain, simplifying it, using advanced analytics to better control what is for most companies the biggest cost in terms of working capital. So equipment or material that is sitting there not being used. So using advanced analytics in that space, right through to digital twin, to IoT, to sensorization and smart products. So quite a lofty ambition, but that's only on the digital side, that's only on the tech side. Adjacent to that then, and part of that offering, we're there to, I suppose, improve the capability, and that touches on the discussion or the mention earlier that Alexandra made about skills, and I suppose developing a skill set within Ireland Inc. around digital manufacturing, in my opinion, where we're quite weak currently. So that's a big area for us. And then the other really important area is to develop standards and associated business models, because there's no doubt that manufacturing is being massively disrupted right now. So we have to help companies, I suppose, realign their business models. And I've got a couple of examples of that, which I'll touch on later. So who are we? So we're centred in the University of Limerick. We're part of a 9-institution cohort. So we have competency in AIT at Lone Institute of Technology around virtual reality, augmented reality. We have competency in the University of Limerick around artificial intelligence. We have competency in NUIG around predictive modelling, advanced analytics. Competency in Tyndall and Cork around sensors and the development of sensors, smart sensors. UCC, we've got the likes of Barry O'Sullivan, who's one of our academics, who sits on he's the chair of the expert working group for artificial intelligence and the European Commission. So he's looking at the whole ethics and side of the deployment of AI. So we're a 25 million funded centre. So we got 25 million euros from SFI. We've married that with about 22 million from industry. And that money is there to, I suppose, to structure our research and to structure our operations. Our research is done in two ways, which I'll come to in a minute. We have 39 investigators, and they're a mix of principal investigators and funded investigators, academics all within this space. We have nine institutions, which I've mentioned there. We have 100 industry partners, or 100 industry stakeholders right now, through many sectors, through food and beverage, through pharmaceutical, through medtech, and all different sizes, multinationals, SMEs, startups, the whole lot. We have 14 industry projects so far. Most of those are focused on, I suppose, better use of predictive modelling, the better use of data to produce products quicker, better, faster, cheaper, more robustly. We're partnered with 8 national research technology centres. So they're not necessarily SFI, Science Foundation Ireland research centres. They're centres that come under the gambit of IDA or Enterprise Ireland. And we work with centres in pharmaceutical, we work with centres in dairy. We have 16 international collaborators, and that's a very important consideration because what you saw some of the great work they're doing on a government and national level in the UK with Alexandra. We suffer a little bit from that. I would say we're not as holistic in terms of our approach right now. We have a lot of learnings to do, but how we can improve that quickly and robustly, I think, is by benchmarking ourselves continuously. So we're doing that on a national level with the likes of MIT, with the likes of A-Star in Singapore, with the likes of MADE in Denmark, and the Institute for Manufacturing in Cambridge in the UK. We're moving into a new facility, and it's dwarfed. I know some of the numbers we mentioned earlier in terms of capital expenditure, but this number is quite low. But we've got a commitment from UL, University of Limerick, to retrofit a facility just off the Grudy Road roundabout. I don't know if you know it, but alongside the Travelodge Hotel. We're moving in there to a 1,600 square metre facility in the next 3 months. And I'll touch a bit on that in a minute. So our 3 objectives, you've understood a little bit about why we exist. You understood a little bit about how we're structured. Now I'm just going to talk about the 3 areas of focus for us. So fundamentally, we're a research centre. So we have to do scientifically robust, excellent research. We have to make a difference on top of that to industry in terms of competitiveness and cost and safety and quality and all of the standard metrics that industry are faced with in the manufacturing space. We also, it's very, very important for us to develop a cohort and to help companies succession plan in this space. So help them deliver, I suppose, training programs through the traditional method, which I'll come to in a minute, but also maybe through more bespoke methods, which increasingly we need to do. We have to engage the public. It's very important that we inform the public about what we're doing and how we're spending their money, because ultimately it's taxpayers' money. And then we're focused very much on the principle of creating a community of practice. And that's something which industry love. And I think we're very good at that in Ireland, and it's something we really need to exploit more and more. This, I suppose, openness and willingness to share information cross-sectorally and at different sizes of companies. We're very, very, I'm seeing it day to day, the large multinational is prepared to share information with the small SME in a different sector to the benefit of both ultimately. And I think that's a unique selling point that we have in Ireland, and we need to exploit it more. But that community of practice, in essence, is a structure where we're centred at PowerPoint, but we're sharing information, we're allowing companies to showcase what they've done in terms of research and technology and where they're at for shared learning. How are we structured? So I mentioned earlier about the focus on smart products, smart machines, and so on. The way we're structured at the moment is quite similar to a lot of the other Science Foundation Ireland centres. So in the middle, you've got the fundamental, very, very core research. That's low technology readiness level. So what that means is it's very, very fundamental. It might never be applied. And that's focused on things like virtual industrialization, cyber-physical systems, and self-aware manufacturing systems. That all seems like a bit of a mouthful, but in essence, it's using data to build better predictive models. Cyber-physical systems. What is a cyber-physical system? Really, a cyber-physical system is a digital twin. And then you're looking at self-aware manufacturing systems, and that feeds into this whole, I suppose, focus increasingly on universal machine, batch of one, more bespoke manufacture. You're seeing general public out there are looking for more bespoke, more differentiated products, and we're seeing the customer is much more centrally located right through the whole manufacturing landscape, and that's not going to change. In fact, that's going to increase. So that self-aware manufacturing systems is building in, I suppose, a degree of flexibility, moving away from your traditional assembly line into much more cellular, more flexible, quite agile, highly bespoke manufacturing landscape. So that's our fundamental research. And then on the outer circle, you have our targeted research, which is where industry come in. So typically industry would come in, we would leverage some of their investment, they would buy expertise typically. And industry are looking always at what can Ireland and what can firms specifically give us in terms of competency that I can't get in the US, or I can't get in the UK, or I can't get in Asia. So that question can be answered by us, but it can be better answered by what I touched on earlier, that whole idea of companies prepared to share information and build a cohort, I suppose a threshold of competency, and that's very important. So the Ireland Inc. factor here is something that we need to very much keep front and centre in our progress. Smart products. What is a smart product? Well, a smart product in essence is a sensor product where you're capturing information from it as it's being used in the field or the customer is using it. And you're then using that information to drive some of your new product development at the front end. A smart machine is again a sensorized machine. It's building cognition and control and awareness into your machine to respond to non-conformance, to detect anomalies much more earlier on in the process and save on cost, quality, time, and so on. Smart production systems is what I touched on earlier. That whole principle of building flexibility and agility into your production and assembly. Smart supply chains. That again is sensorizing a lot of your materials, capturing information right through the life cycle. How is it behaving? Who's responsible for it if it becomes non-conforming? If it arrives wet or it arrives out of conformance. Capturing that information through the whole transport and warehousing system, and then building in better predictive modelling for control of working capital. So where do those two collide? So I touched on the fundamental and the applied. Where do they collide? Where do they coalesce? Well, they coalesce. If you could see on the columns, you see our hub research, and on the rows you see our targeted research. And they coalesce in a number of projects, and these are some of the active projects that we have at the moment. So smart products, full traceability of your materials, better product to machine communication through the use of sensors and IoT, cobots, even though there's real challenges with cobots out there, I would say, in terms of their deployment, algorithms for intelligent machines, and building cognition into equipment, VR, virtual reality for training and putting yourself, simulating particular environments. Companies are using that a lot to see how you would respond to a particular environment from a safety perspective or a productivity perspective. So there are some of the examples of some of the projects we've done so far. Education, public engagement. So that's the research side. The second objective is to build or to drive talent and education. So what are we doing in terms of talent? We're working with second level and third level institutions to train and do a lot of work placement and bursary schemes with people. We're going into the schools, we're doing workshops, we're doing training courses with those guys, and we're building capability. What are we doing with the public in general? Well, we're informing them. We're having workshops, we're having open days, and that's an increasing focus for us. We're doing an awful lot of social media as well. And then as well, we're trying to bring a lot of this whole thinking of arts and the softer skills into science, technology, engineering, and manufacturing, into that whole STEM space. And that's a really interesting area for us. We're doing a lot of public events, informal discussions, and then what are we doing in terms of capacity building? So that's really where the whole succession planning and training comes in. And we're doing a lot of work with teachers on the CPD side. We're doing... We've recently started a Marie Curie fellowship program, a European fellowship program, 16 fellows working in the area of AI deployed throughout our cohort. Just some pictures here. You can see in the top right, that was a digital twin workshop that we had in Thomond Park back in November. So we had 100 industry partners at that, and then we had a panel discussion. So we had a mix there, I suppose, of academics, industry, service providers, technologists, and so on. That was really interesting. At the bottom there, you can see some activity we're doing with kiddies and second level, third level. So what are we doing in terms of training? Right now, we're taking advantage of the fact that we have 9 institutions, and we're taking advantage of the fact that each of them have a skill set that is kind of unique, and we're developing or we're deploying our training around that. So we're doing an M engine mechatronics in UL. We're doing an AI masters in UL and in CIT. But that's only part of the solution, and in my mind, that won't solve all of our problems. These are again a traditional answer to a non-traditional need. So we have to, I suppose, reconfigure a lot of this and deliver as a nation a much more bespoke and comprehensive suite of training. Companies out there are not necessarily looking for a 4-year degree course because their internal cohort don't need that. What they do need, that's only part of the solution. What they need is more agile, more bespoke, remote training courses that are much shorter, over a much shorter time span. And that's where Ireland Inc. at the moment is falling down. We're not very well positioned in that space at the moment. So increasingly we'll be doing work with the likes of Skillnet, and we'll be doing a lot of work with the department. Debbie, Department of Enterprise Business and Innovation, will be helping us with that. But we're only part of the solution, really. So I touched on structure, I touched on research, I touched on the education public engagement. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the community practice. So it's very much a centred, open door policy. People can come and go, industry will rent space, we'll do a lot of targeted projects with industry there. We'll be doing a lot of our fundamental research there. It's centred at PowerPoint, as I said. It's a dedicated facility, and it'll be an it'll really be, I suppose, the manifestation of our community practice, and it'll be the centre point of that. And so multinationals, venture capitalists, startups, training agencies, NSAI, regulators, all of these will have a space in this ecosystem. So really, really exciting. Bear in mind for a minute though that we're not, when I talked earlier about the research, we're not as a research centre at the really top end. So when you look at the whole cradle to grave of product development and research, the scale that typically is used is technology readiness level. We're at the lower end of that. So we're more fundamental, and some aspects have applied, but not really at the top end, which is where the prototyping come in. Prototyping and the deployment and commercialization comes in. But that feeds into the mention earlier I made about the fact that we need a holistic approach here. That's not only on the training side, but also on the agency side. So we have the IDA, which is hoping to develop a new facility in Limerick, the Advanced Manufacturing Centre. That'll be much more higher TRL, and there'll be a logical synergy between us and them. So we'll work at the lower TRL stuff and hand over to these guys. But ultimately, we're positioning ourselves as a country to better, I suppose, attract foreign direct investment with that holistic offering. What are our growth projections? So if you look at the moment, we have we're planning to have by mid of next year 163 people in total. Right now, I would say we have our annual conference in 2 weeks' time. That's about 100 people, a mix of academics and researchers. So our growth projections are pretty aggressive. We're hoping to be by mid 2025 to be at 350 people, and most of that is through industry targeted research growth. So you can see at the second last line there, you can see that our SFI funded spoke researchers is going to increase from currently about 60 up to about 131. But that's all uncertain at the moment. I mean, we'll ultimately be judged by to what extent we've made a difference for industry and to what extent we did it through the use of robust, excellent research. So standards, why are they important? I think they're very important now because this whole digital manufacturing space is very nascent, very new. It's developing very, very fast, and it's almost developing too fast. So the standards are not in a place. There is, in many cases, for a lot of this technology, there isn't even a standard, or there's a defunct or an obsolete standard. So we're positioning ourselves with the likes of NSAI, and increasingly we'll be there with the FDA for the highly regulated sectors to help develop standards and to help ensure validation. I mean, ultimately, when you look at cognition and machine learning and building cognition into equipment, there's a real validation challenge there, and that's something that the regulated sectors are going to have to overcome through help with ourselves to ensure deployment. So when you look at standards, you're looking at right through that whole TRL landscape, from test and measurement, interfacing, right through to performance and product standards. So we think it's very relevant for us right now. It'll differentiate us. If you look at, we've been charged as a centre to secure a lot of European funding through Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe. That's looking at competitiveness and grand challenges around the area of circular economy, digital health. We're in that space, and if you look at the success rates in that area, increasingly applications are successful if they include an aspect of standards. Impact. So it's very important when we're helping companies measure ROI, or at least assess ROI or the projected ROI, that we're able to, I suppose, bring a standards aspect to this. There's no point in in I suppose looking at projecting ROI, and then we've got a contradiction in terms of standards, or we're not meeting a standards requirement. So they go hand in hand. And then it's timely. It's timely because we're starting early, we're new, and industry need it, and we know that they need it. So that's why we're focusing on standards. And then how do we do it? I touched earlier on our hub research. I touched earlier on our targeted research. So we embed it that way. We do our research with a focus on some of the applicable standards. We help companies develop standards in the targeted research. We're doing it all of the time in our hub research, which is going on irrespective of our engagement with industry. We do it, as I just mentioned, as part of our application for Horizon 2020. We are very cognizant, and increasingly so, of the need to help companies and ourselves develop spin-outs in this space, and we're charged with that requirement as part of our funding. So you've seen over the years many companies use standards as a way to differentiate and as a way of tying up a marketplace and getting a run on their competition. So that's an area we're going to look at. And then this whole area of 5G. So we're developing a 5G testbed, the first manufacturing 5G testbed in the country. And again, we'll be taking a standards. We'll be taking a standards approach to that too, and developing standards in that space from an Irish perspective. So now I'll come to digital twin finally. So I'll give you an idea of where we're at from a digital twin perspective. You've seen much of the commentary this morning on the BIM and facilities management. I'm looking at it a little bit different in terms of the manufacturing. Digital twin, as Roger said, exists for a long time. You've got your PLCs, your SCADA, MES systems. To a certain extent, a lot of those are digital twins. You're capturing information and you're responding to it. You're capturing information on a virtual platform and you're responding to it. So a digital twin, if you look at what Deloitte said here, they said it's a near-time digital image of a physical object or process which helps optimize business performance. That optimized business performance is absolutely vital. You've got to bring that thinking to the front end. Ultimately, even though we're a research centre, all of this is driven by business need. So you've got to focus on the output and the financial benefits. Colin Paris from GE mentioned that a digital twin is a living model. I like that one. It's a living model. It's a real-life example. You're capturing live information and you're responding to it. Again, focused on a business outcome. And the last one from Gartner. And Gartner, remember, have recognised that digital twin is one of the top 10 most relevant technologies for this year. That might change next year. Let's wait and see. But for now, that's the landscape. And they've mentioned that it's a dynamic software model of a physical thing, a system. So how does it work? So as Roger mentioned earlier, it's about having an ecosystem, an infrastructure there of sensors. You're capturing data from a process, from a product, from a machine. You're using that data, you're analysing that data, and then you're actuating on that data. You're responding to that data, be it in terms of changing the parameters of a particular process or a particular equipment, or looking at trends, or even calling a halt to a process. One very interesting aspect of a digital twin, and something here that we didn't touch on this morning, was this is all very good, right? It's real live information, and you're responding to non-conformance, or you're trying to improve performance. And it's that coalescence of machine, people, environment, and with coalesced, I suppose, over a number of different platforms. But what's very, very interesting here is that you can use, if you use this correctly, you can use it, number one, for simulation. So you're predicting what will happen in a particular outcome if I do X to a process or X to a machine. What are the likely outcomes? That's very important. Secondarily, this whole idea of retrospective analysis. I've sent a product to a customer. It hasn't worked very well. Right now, we're looking at QC or QA data, and we're thinking, but that's not telling the full story. A digital twin will allow us to tell us the full story, because you're looking at all of the related and relevant information for a process or a machine at a particular time and place. So that's a powerful mention. What are we doing in right now from a research perspective in Limerick? You can see here we have a digital twin of our large joining suite, robotic joining suite. It's a multi-million euro investment. We're moving that into PowerPoint. So where does digital twin fit in the landscape? It's even though it's around for a long time, it's I suppose there's a level of kind of hysteria a little bit about it, but also I suppose there's a mystique about it. People are a bit overawed by it. They think it's almost too much, and to a certain extent it is. So it's very important that we decomplex and demystify it. And so where does it fit? It fits, I suppose, there's overlap with every other aspect of a key enabling technology within the Industry 4.0 landscape. There's data implications, there's AR implications, there is cloud computing and edge computing implications. Obviously, the Internet of Things and the connectivity of equipment is very central to all of this. And system integration is very important, obviously, and the whole simulation aspect. I touched on Gartner earlier, and I mentioned that it's one of the top 10 technologies in their view for this year. A lot of you might have seen this is the Gartner hype curve. And hype is a very relevant term, I suppose, in this landscape right now. What we're seeing with companies out there, and you're probably seeing it too, is a mix of hysteria, a mix of fear, a mix of lack of understanding. And if you look at this, you can see it's very interesting. It might be quite difficult to see all of it, but this really is, I suppose, a profile of where all of the key enabling technologies in Industry 4.0 are positioned right now. And if you look closely, I think digital twin is still in the early stages. It's a nascent technology, and it hasn't yet reached where some of the other technologies like AR have in terms of that trough of disillusionment. So people were, I suppose, overpromised and underdelivered in terms of a lot of these technologies, and that doesn't help in the landscape of, I suppose, improving competency. So people have seen they were promised X in terms of AR and Y was delivered, and therefore that can be a challenge in terms of what we do next for companies. And when they look at digital twin, they think, my God, will it really deliver what you say it will? So that's an interesting curve. I touched earlier a little bit about this whole importance of IoT, sensorization, capturing information, responding to it. So how do we do it in essence? If we were to go tomorrow and try to create a digital twin, we would have to, in my opinion, create an infrastructure of interoperability between all of the existing platforms. Companies out there are overwhelmed by data. They've got data on their CMMS systems, on their Salesforce systems, on their MES systems, on their PLC systems. It's all over the place, and that's one of the challenges we have: is what data do we use, and who gets it, and what do we do with it? So the starting point for digital twin is firstly that discussion: what data do we need to better inform you about a particular process or product? So you create a system in which you capture that data, you then communicate that data, you aggregate it, you interrogate it, and then you analyze it. And that all needs to be within the context of highly interoperable systems. But it's not without its challenges. As we go increasingly towards more data, we have that conflict between edge and cloud, that conflict between cybersecurity and early response, and cost and risk. So that's a challenge. We have a challenge, I think, also in terms of what information we're using and who gets it and where and how it's communicated. So that's still there. So I think there's an awful lot of considerations still to be thought through before we really can feel that we're there in terms of digital twin. What I would recommend, and what I do recommend with companies, is to focus on the business need. If this isn't going to impact the customer, why the hell would you do it? So identify firstly where the customer need is. Does this make a difference to the customer? And what's important for the customer? What critical characteristics of a particular product or a process are important to a customer? Focus on those and create a digital twin of that particular process, but keep it quite small and modular and build from there. Don't try to overpromise and undeliver, because companies will fail. So why digital twin at all? Well, it gives you greater process control. You're responding to non-conformance. You're seeing trends in a live environment. You're positioning yourselves to improve quality. You're enabling yourself to respond to non-conformance and build the capability around change management. The people aspect is huge here. I haven't really touched on it, but it's enormous. People have to be embedded and involved in all of these processes. They have to understand the impact of it and how they can impact it. More robust and shorter new product development. So you see how product development, how a product is used in the field. You understand where it was deficient, and then you're able to better plan your new product development. Scalability advantages for sure. So you start modular and you build from there. Operational cost reductions. But I think digital twin for sure has the capability to bring all of the digital manufacturing and facility management, all of that stuff into one ecosystem. You're using sensors, you're using data, you're using a model, you're predicting, you're simulating, and you're doing it all within the context of improving the traditional challenges that we all have around cost, quality, time, and customer need. So I think it's an ideal technology, but let's not overpromise and underdeliver. Let's focus on taking your time, building a cohort of expertise from an Irish context. And that's why I'm so energized about coming here today, because I think there's real opportunity for us guys in the manufacturing space, notwithstanding, and you guys in the facility management and construction space, to really look at overlaps. Because I think as a nation, if we continue to work in silos and say that's manufacturing, that's supply chain, that's construction, then we'll do ourselves a disservice. And I think we're ideally positioned now to change that landscape. And that's why I'm here. So thank you.
Thanks, Bill.